Hello and welcome to Marble City Opera's Behind the Scenes episode. I am Kathryn Frady, Executive Artistic Director for Marble City Opera, and I am so excited today to be talking with the star and creator of our upcoming performance, Lily, Audrey Babcock. Welcome, Audrey. How are you today?
For having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. And also I have with me James Marble, Stage Director. Hi, James. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm great, as you know, since we're in the same house, but I always think that's fun. Okay, so I just wanted to give our audience just a little bit of background on how we met. And most people know that James is my husband, and we met in Wichita, Kansas. But I also seem to remember, Audrey, that we met in Wichita, Kansas also. Is that
We
right? On the
did. We
production of
did. That was,
Carmen?
yeah, that was
Yeah.
an
We won't go
adventure.
into the whole sort of details today. That's another behind the
Oh,
scenes episode.
oh, Wichita.
Oh, Wichita. But it's so funny to me because so many of my colleagues and artists that I love to work with come from some of the same little places. So Wichita had this amazing ability to bring people together, actually. And I think maybe the circumstances really allowed everyone to bond. And so I have a lot of friends from my time in Wichita. And it's like being at a young artist program, which Wichita wasn't, but when you're also at young artist programs, I have lots of friends that come out of that program and make the connection. So on that note, where did you all meet?
We actually met in Longview, Texas. I don't remember the year, but it was probably like 2001
One.
or something like that. And it was a sort of a staged concert, and I think there was a soprano, a mezzo, a tenor, and a baritone, and yeah, so Audrey was there, and we've been in touch and been fast friends ever since.
That's awesome. So it wasn't in Utah.
No, no, we met in Longview, and then I think maybe Audrey, you might have moved to New York like shortly thereafter, and I think I was already living in New York, and then I don't know, we like hung out once in Santa Barbara, like well as you were driving through or whatever,
Yes,
and
we did.
yeah, and then we were in Utah together for multiple summers. We weren't always working on the same show,
No.
but we were usually housed together, I think. So
Yeah, that's fun. I remember the memory of you all being at Utah, and that's a young artist program. So that's where I was going
Well,
with all
20
of that.
years is a long time, or 20 plus years at this point. So take your pick. We've bonded.
Oh, that's fabulous. And I'm so excited to actually be bringing Lily to Marble City Opera. I know it's a production you all worked on together in New York when you first premiered it. And Audrey, you and I have talked about it several times about the possibility of bringing it to Marble City Opera. I think originally we were going to do it in 2017. And then you had an artist residency, I think, come up.
Yeah.
Um, so I ended up doing Lavoie instead, which was fun because that was always one of my dreams. But I'm so excited to have Lily here at Marble City Opera this season.
I'm thrilled.
So tell us a little bit about Lily. What is the story? Who is Lily?
Lily is a fictional character uh, who follows loosely the trajectory of Kurt Weill's life. Um, in 1933 or so, or 1933, I think, Weil was targeted by the Nazis, being a German citizen, and he fled to Paris, and then uh, Three Penny Opera got picked up on Broadway, and that brought him to the United States. And though that wasn't super successful at its premiere, that brought him to many opportunities to start working in Hollywood. And his original career trajectory, even when he was young, was to revolutionize opera and make it a subject matter for the masses. And for me as a young singer who came from theater but had an operatic voice, and I was thrown into opera before I even really knew what it was. He immediately appealed to me in that respect. His music is so, at the time and still to this day, is quite genre bending, um, which is something that I'm absolutely, attracted to in every way. Also, his father was a cantor, and he grew up in a very Jewish environment. And he came out into a secular life that always had some sort of foothold in his upbringing. And I just always found that to be something quite remarkable, especially for the time. Um, and so Lily, I created her um, out of a story, and I don't want to jump into the like next questions, but it's kind of hard to answer it briefly.
That's okay. Tell us whatever you want.
So I was in college and I heard Surabaya Johnny, someone sang it in a master class, and she had a chair and she was doing a whole scene. And I just remember thinking, there's a whole opera in there in that one song. And I wonder what it is. And I just started to dive into his music to try to find my own story that I wanted to tell, that sort of wrapped around the experience in that song, because the character goes through a whole lifetime in that one song. And the way the storytelling unfolds is, you have no idea where you're going until you get there. And then it's just gutting. So I wanted to find a story that went along with that song. And I took the trajectory of Kurt Weill's life, and here we are.
That's amazing. I love that story. It's so, I mean, so true to you as being a creator of this piece, being inspired by this piece of music, and seeing what life it could have beyond just standing there and singing in front of a piano. I love that. It's really cool. So James, when did Audrey approach you about directing this piece and collaborating with her? And what was your original approach in telling the story?
I don't actually remember. Was it an email or a phone call? That part of it is not super clear to me in my memory. I just know that, Audrey, we talked a little bit about Bertolt Brecht and Kurt Weill, and we both love Kurt Weill. And I did a lot of Kurt Weill stuff. I actually did a production of Three Penny Opera in graduate school, and we worked with some directors from Germany on this like style of theater. So I've always had a strong affinity for the theater that came out of Germany during this time period, and also the subsequent music that came to the United States. But I don't know. I knew that Audrey was definitely the perfect person to kind of explore this role with, and it's kind of like, in the Marble City production of Winterreise, where it's like this song cycle exists, right? But like telling a fully sort of realized narrative is one kind of thing. Well, the work that Audrey and I did together, and Audrey did a lot of the heavy lifting on it, was really to kind of like take all of these pieces and find a dramatic arc of, how she begins in Berlin and what that relationship is like, and how then she moves into France. And then as the Nazis are moving into France, to make that move to the United States, and really just exploring, Lily is such a intensely three-dimensional character that Audrey created and realized, and I don't know. It was a really wonderful collaboration, and I think that was my first time also collaborating with Ray Feldman, who is such a lovely human as well. So there were so many great people on the original production, but maybe we'll talk about that a little later.
Yeah, we definitely will. Well, I want to hear all about the collaborations. And Ray Feldman, Audrey, maybe you can tell us who Ray is, because he's also coming to Marble City Opera to be a part of this production. We're really bringing as many of the elements from that original production back to Knoxville. So who's Ray? Yeah.
Ray and I met when we were young artists in Florida Grand Opera a million years ago. And he was this huge baritone, singing Rigoletto when we were very young. Turned out he was a Helden tenor and also wanted to be a music director. He had been a music director in his previous life, started singing. It was going really well and he was getting lots of scholarships. So he kept singing, but his passion had been in music directing, which he had done for years. And he's such a ridiculously talented pianist and music director. It's stunning. But he and I were fast friends in that young artist circuit, and we've stayed friends for so many years, as we do. And he was just the one. And same thing with James. He was just the one. It wasn't even like, it wasn't something I had to think about. It
Or
was
as I like to call myself, El Uno. That was a 30 Rock reference.
So yeah, I mean, so Ray and I go way back, and he's on faculty in Indiana. He started their musical theater program, and Ray, he's like my brother from another mother.
That's awesome. Well, it's exciting to bring him to the production as well. And also Katie Tucker did the video projections, and we are using some of her work. So James, why don't you tell us about Katie? And Audrey, did you know Katie before, or was this somebody that James brought onto the team? How did that
I can't really
start?
recall. I feel like it was through Vita.
Yeah.
Vita and Katie were attached artistically for many years and probably still are. But that's how I came to know Katie, and her artistry is magical. And James can speak more.
And
Absolutely.
was Vita I'm sorry, James, was Vita the costume designer?
Vita was the costume coordinator and set coordinator.
Okay.
So we didn't have a production full enough to require design.
Okay, yes.
It was a lot of coordinating.
A lot of coordinating.
And a lot of penny rubbing and making fire.
So the same as we're doing again. That's great. So I'm sorry, James, tell us about Katie Tucker.
Yeah, I mean, this was my first time working with Katie Tucker. And I think, I don't know how many operas she had done before that, but Katie and I have since gone on to do probably, I don't know, 12 productions together, somewhere between like 8 and 15. And I think it was definitely my first time working with a video projection designer at all. So I was honestly like a little scared and insecure. Like I didn't know what it was going to be like, how it was going to go. I mean, honestly, like everybody on the original project was just like such an amazingly kind human being that like making art when you get to work with people like that, like Tlaloc Lopez Waterman was the lighting designer. So it was like Tlaloc, it was Katie, it was Audrey, it was Ray and Vita, and you just couldn't go wrong. I mean, it was just an awesome experience. And I mean, Katie is, I believe, just finished designing something at the Metropolitan Opera just a few weeks ago. She's been at the Opera House in Sydney. She's been all over Europe, and I mean, her career has been truly expansive and truly international. And she's, thought of as being one of the top people in the industry, and continues to be and will continue to be so.
So what part of her work are we using for Marble City Opera's production?
So what we did was we sort of looked at elements of what theater design was like in Berlin and Germany during this time. And we really tried to explore and, in a sense, exploit some of that aesthetic in a lot of the visual imagery that we were using. So a lot of the sort of very jagged angles that you would see in a typical German expressionist film from the time, like the 20s and the 30s cinema, we pulled and relied heavily on that for the Berlin portion. And then we sort of softened it and made it a little more romantic and elegant for the French Parisian kind of elements of the story. And then I think what we ended up doing was, for the Hollywood portion, we were kind of looking to create that almost sort of like cookie cutter architectural kind of feel of like Edward Scissorhands, the movie. It's like it's this weird suburban landscape that's like, it's clean, but it makes you feel like a little uneasy. And I think what we actually ended up finding were images of Levittown, New Jersey, which was sort of like one of the original places where they had just like manufactured housing where every house looked the same, like over and over and over again. And we were trying to create, because when Lily goes to America and to Hollywood, she doesn't quite feel that she fits in. You know, she doesn't feel like she's at home. And so having that quality sort of reflected in the architecture that we were choosing seemed extremely appropriate. And you know, and Audrey was I mean, it was an extremely collaborative thing. Vita was making suggestions, I was making suggestions, Audrey was making suggestions, Katie's making proposals. So like the whole time, it's just, you know, you put a bunch of smart people in a room and really good things happen. And so we're using that same video footage, and it's going to be epic.
That's really great. And we've been able to get DJ Pike from the University of Tennessee, who's a theater student there, who's going to help us realize Katie's work in the theater. So she won't be here with us, but she will be on the stage with us. So that's exciting. So Audrey, tell me a little bit about, you kind of alluded to it, but what kind of theater piece would you say this is? I mean, it's not, you talked about Kurt Weill's music, kind of bending the genres a little bit. So is it opera? Is it musical theater? How would you categorize it? And tell us a little bit more about how you went about creating it.
The discussion around what is it was also, to quote James, it was epic. It's its own sort of genre in of itself. I think what I settled on is calling it a melodrama in a very old-fashioned sort of milieu. It is hyper realistic, except that it's also totally true to the human condition. Because, you know, in times of in certain kinds of theater, we want to subdue our animalistic emotions and only show the glossy parts. But in Lily, it's life or death is on the line as she's running through Europe. So the glossy parts aren't really present. When we get to Hollywood, we see her put on her glossy parts, but we also get to see her in the moments where she takes her hats off and she's standing there alone in front of this architecture that is obviously foreign to her, and this area that is foreign to her, and people that are foreign to her, a language that is foreign to her. So we don't shy away from the realistic emotions that humans have when they're put to the test of needing to survive. We should put little trigger warnings in here. There is domestic violence, and it's as epic as it can be when you're doing a one-woman show. But I think we have it in the sound design. We have the suggestion of it in the projections behind Lily at the time. One thing that we did is we took a very an apartment scenario that looks wrong. You know, it looks abused. And then we turned it on its side, so it's not quite straight. And it just gives you this uneasy feeling that something bad is going to happen. And it does. Spoiler alert. So yeah, I mean, we're going through, so there is some spoken dialogue. There is sound design, but it's really an experience of we're going through this with musical and underscore the whole time, and you're experiencing her experience of the situation, and the whole affect becomes all consuming. But I hope at the end, though she speaks every once in a while and she's mostly singing and she's sometimes just making noise, it's more of an immersive experience. It's not musical theater, it's not opera, but it's this little thing called a melodrama.
I love it. Yeah, I'm excited to see it. And you wanted Ray Feldman because I think you mentioned to me that it's some of it is improvised. Is that correct? You said it's the whole thing is underscored. Is there any improvisation that Ray has to do during the piece?
I think there was, and he may remember it differently, but a lot of what we came to for this production, as far as the musical aspects and the underscoring, a lot of what we came to was collaborative, but it was created out of his fingers. We would play with keys, and we would play with accompaniment, we would play with adding texture here, taking texture away there. So it was a definite collaborative experience, and a lot of what it is not necessarily on the page. So it's not the kind of piece where you hand someone a score and you show up on rehearsal and it's ready to go. A lot of this was a collaborative experience, and there's also a lot of give and take between Lily, and he plays a character. He's Joe. And I talk to him, and sometimes he talks back. We'll see what happens.
Does he always talk back, or is that, in the moment?
I don't know. I mean, it's been a little while, so we'll have to see. I mean, James will have a lot to say about it, I'm sure, but it's super helpful that Ray is also an actor, and an experienced stage person as a soloist and as a singer, as well as a music director and a pianist in his own right. So to have someone who's an active participant on the stage, he's not an accompanist. That is not what he's doing.
That's very cool. That's very exciting. And so I guess then it will be slightly different probably in this rendition of the piece than it was in New York the first time you did it, and perhaps a little different each night.
I would imagine.
That's exciting. I mean, so like when people come and see this performance, it's literally happening in real time, and it's rehearsed and it's choreographed, but it's not set in a sense. She's living and breathing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in the New York production, Lily has several bottles of whiskey placed around the stage, and all of the whiskey was real. So you could see Audrey deteriorate throughout the performance. No, I'm just kidding.
The cigarettes were real too.
That's right.
Back in the day, gosh, we just dated ourselves. When James was talking about how did you first contact me for the thing, he said email. I was like, I don't even think we had email.
Yeah, it was like a fax machine. I don't know.
I sent a carrier pigeon,
yeah.
a note on its foot.
I received stone tablets in the mail. It was weird.
It just came to his doorstep in Brooklyn. He's like, what's this?
Oh my goodness. Called from a landline.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
left a message on an answering machine.
Hello.
That's right.
Oh my goodness, that's fantastic. So James, I normally put you all in a unique site-specific venue with Marble City Opera, but we're kind of going into more of a traditional venue. We're going to be at the Flying Anvil Theater, which is our new home base. And while we're still going to be taking performances into other parts of the community, this is our first production happening at the Flying Anvil Theater. So what should the audience expect that is different from what we normally do? And what are the main differences, do you think, from this?
That's a really interesting question. And I think that in this instance, in a weird way, it is a site-specific show in the sense that Bertolt Brecht and Kurt Weill were such men of the theater that doing it in a theater is the best place that you can do it, right? And so, because in the story of Lily, as we've mentioned, she travels from Berlin to Paris to the United States, and like showing that in a site-specific way would not really be so easy to do, unless you kind of imagine the Sun Sphere in Knoxville as being the Eiffel Tower, which
I've seen some photos that make that look true. Yeah,
is that right? It's probably sacrilegious, but in any event, no. I mean, I'm actually really excited about it because it gives us an opportunity to really focus in on the performers, to focus in on the immaculate work of Katie Tucker, and to really have the piece be character-centered by these composers. Like Kurt Weill, his idea in his compositions was that music he kind of switched things in the sense that, you know, in the past, composers would use music to sing their feelings, right? Their emotions. Kurt Weill was a little different. He believed that music should serve a socially useful purpose, which I think is very much like on brand with what Marble City Opera does. You know, Marble City Opera's productions frequently have extremely socially relevant, you know, meanings and productions that explore sometimes very difficult themes. And Kurt Weill would have loved Marble City Opera and like what y'all do. And so. And so, in a sense, I think a theater is the perfect place for Lily to exist because she herself is a performer as well. And so, to me, it makes a lot of logical sense.
That's great. And also, the space is small. It only seats 125 on a full day. So it's still very intimate. You're still very close to the performers, and so I think from that perspective, it'll still feel very much like a Marble City Opera site-specific production. Audrey.
I forgot to lead with what James sort of alluded to. When we meet Lily, she's describing her current predicament. However, we quickly realize that she has been a performer in the underground Berlin cabaret scene, and that's how she's been making her living. And she's been able to do that under cover of makeup and costumes and a pimp per se, her John, and she's been able to hide from the powers that be in Germany at that time. It wasn't until her Johnny drags her out of there where she gets picked up and targeted, and that's when we see her having to put on her star, and that's when she tries to find a way out. But she had been hiding very successfully for a very long time, making a couple pennies here and there by being a singer. So we're following her using the few skills that she has to get herself around. And when she arrives in Hollywood, it's the one thing she has that she knows she can do, and that's what she clings to try to get a foothold here. And so that's sort of a through line that I forgot to mention.
Oh, that's great. Is there anything else that you would like to add, Audrey? And what do you hope the audience will get from this performance?
Well, as I said, and I think to Brandon, I feel like we've all been through a lot in this last year and a half, however long this is going to keep on going. And to watch someone who's really been through a struggle, who's really gone through something that was life or death. It could have been the end of her a couple of times. and to then find yourself as like a stranger in a strange land, but with hope and grit. And she's not broken, you know? She's gone through things that we would all consider to be otherworldly as far as her trauma and her pain. And yet she shows up in her life and she's ready to move on, and she's not going to rely on this past story of hers to create her future.
Wow.
She's going to create something new and beautiful, and everything that happened to her is just fuel for the fire, but it's not going to weigh her down.
I love that. She's
That's
resilient.
So
it
yeah.
is really beautiful. Yeah. We can all use a little bit of that.
And that for me too is, you know, especially in the last few years when we've seen a significant uprise in anti-Semitic sentiment, not only in the United States, but throughout the world. And, you know, we see so many people going back towards the wrong side of history and really like rethinking like how we need to confront that, and we need to challenge that and like break apart those bad ideas. And, you know, unfortunately, a lot of the people who have those bad ideas don't go to theater, but they're really the people who need to see it. You know what I mean? But by continuing to do this socially relevant work and to keep it in the forefront of people's minds, I think as artists is the best thing that we can do. I mean, we use our talent and our art form to push forward these ideas so that we don't ever delve back into those dark times, you know. And I think what is actually so excruciatingly beautiful about Lily is her resilience and her ability to weather all the storms that she has incurred personally, you know, at the hands of men, at the hands of Nazis, at the hands of even a female who betrays her as well, right, Audrey? In
Yeah.
France.
Betrayal does not have a gender.
So, I mean, I think that exploring all of those themes is just tremendously powerful and important for this time in history right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I cannot tell you how excited I am to experience this melodrama here at Marble City Opera. And we hope that you will all who are watching today will share this video with your friends, invite your friends to see it. It's going to be performed in person at the Flying Anvil Theater on October 29th and 30th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can also get an online ticket and watch it anywhere you are in the world. So join us in person or online for this amazing production created by Audrey Babcock. It's been so wonderful to talk to both of you. I do just want to mention also to our audience that we are following some COVID protocols. We are asking all of our audience to be vaccinated or to show a negative COVID test and to wear masks. So please know that as you're making your arrangements to join us in person or online. And thank you both, James Marvel and Audrey Babcock, for joining me here today. It's been a pleasure to talk to both of you, and tune in next week. Audrey is going to be giving us a little sneak preview of Lily, and then join us at the end of the month. So thank you both.
Thank you.